Hello everyone. Today we are going to be discussing the topic of time in Spanish. I'm going to show you how to tell time. Now, telling time is actually pretty simple. Once you know the formula, telling time will be pretty simple, okay? So as you see here, the expression for that in Spanish is decir la hora, which literally means to tell the hour, but it would translate as to tell time, okay? Oh, right, we don't use the verb contar. We use that with numbers, okay? But with time, we say decir la hora. Now, how do we go about telling time, okay? So the first step, or the first thing we need to know is that we use the third person plural conjugation of ser. And in this case, it is going to mean it is, okay? So to introduce time, we use the third person plural conjugation of ser, which would be son. So that's the first step. We use son to say it is, right? Because when we talk about time, and let's say somebody asks you what time is it, you will say, well, it is whatever. So the it is part we use ser, but we use the third person plural, right? Okay. After we use the verb ser, this is the second thing that we do. We use the plural feminine definite article las for the hour, with the exception of 1 o'clock, which uses the singular feminine definite article la. Okay, so son, las. So for every hour apart from 1 o'clock, we will use las, right? So the definite article is going to be plural for every hour except 1 o'clock, okay? So if 1 o'clock uses the singular article, then you know that means that 1 o'clock has to be used with s and not son, because that's an exception. It is singular, so it is s for 1 o'clock, right? So far we have the third person plural conjugation of ser, except for 1 o'clock, plus las, right? The definite article las, okay? So now we get to actually mentioning the hour, okay? So after, no, sorry, what am I talking about? Right, so after you use las, you would mention the hour, whatever the hour may be. So now we get into the minutes, if there are minutes, right? So after mentioning the hour, we use e, which is the conjunction to mean and, right? E followed by the number of minutes to mention the minutes, right? So, yes, here we have the formula laid out for you, right? So ser, that is used to introduce the time, right? So third person plural, which should be son, okay? Las, plural feminine definite article. The hora, which would be the hour as a number. And then we have the minutes. The minutes will be expressed as a number just like the hour, right? And between the hora and minutes will be e, right? Now, let's go back to 1 o'clock. So I would have told you that 1 o'clock carries the singular feminine definite article, right? So that uses la. And therefore, it needs the singular third person conjugation of ser, right? And remember I told you that the hora is going to be expressed as the number, the number of the hour. But 1 o'clock is different. 1 in Spanish is uno. But when it comes to 1 o'clock, you say es la una. You don't say es la uno, you say es la una. It is 1 o'clock. So 1 o'clock is a little different from the others. But for all, excuse me, but for all the other times, you're going to use son, las, and then you mention the hour, right? And if you want to introduce minutes, you use the conjunction e, and then you give the number of minutes, okay? But before we get into some examples, okay, I need to mention that, of course, you can use other tenses, right? So if I'm using this, if I'm want to tell time in the past, then I would use ser in the imperfect, because you know the imperfect is used with time when it comes to the past, right? So in that case, it would be eran, right? Or if it's 1 o'clock, it would be era la una. So you can use different tenses, of course, right? Now, in order to tell time, or at least to tell the hour, you need to be able to count to 12, right? So you need to be able to count to 12 to at least to give the hour, right? When it comes to the minutes, you will need to know to count to 59. Not necessarily, but there's another method that I will show you to tell time later on in this lesson. But yes, knowing how to count to 59 will help you express the minutes in one way at least, right? So let's go to also the 24-hour clock time, right? So you know that'll be a little different to this. This is 12 hour. So in Spanish speaking countries, the 24-hour clock time is more used for official purposes, for like playing schedules and train schedules, stuff like that. So in that case, then you would need to know for the hour, you would need to know to count up to 24, right? So that's the only difference there. So an example of a 24-hour clock time would be son las 23. Son las 23. So that would be, it is 2300 hours, or it is 11 p.m., right? But let's continue. So how do we ask for the time? Simple. ¿Qué hora es? What time is it? Or literally, what hour is it? ¿Qué hora es? And then, of course, we will respond by saying son las whatever, right? So let's look at some examples. So remember the formula. The third person plural of ser, which would be son, because, you know, this is used for all other hours apart from 1. Son las 7. Simple. Son las 3. And now we have an hour with minutes, right? So son las 10 y and 16. It is 10:16. Okay? So of course, like I said, the ser means it is, right? Now, let's say we want to mention the time that an event starts, or an activity. How would we do that? So we would use the preposition a, because a means at. All right, so you see how this question asks ¿Qué hora es? What time is it? So in order to ask what time an event takes place, we would say, let's say for example, we want to ask what time does the party start? We would say ¿A qué hora empieza la fiesta? What time does the party start? So in our answer, we would say la fiesta comienza. Yeah, comienza or empieza, same thing. And then we say, then we mention the time. You know, the article las 5. So the party starts at 5. ¿A qué hora comienza la fiesta? La fiesta comienza a las 5. The party starts at 5 o'clock. So if we want to mention the specific time of an event, that's how we do it. We use the preposition a. So if we're asking the question, we put preposition at the front. Okay? And in our response, we would say the event, mention the event starts at whatever time. Right? So there are two other expressions that will be useful with time, and that would be en punto, which means sharp or on the dot. So if we want to say it is 7 o'clock on the dot, we would say son las 7 en punto. It is 7 o'clock sharp, or it is 7 o'clock on the dot. Or if we want to say it is almost 7 o'clock, almost would be casi. So we would say son, you could say son casi las 7. Right? It is almost 7 o'clock. Right? Right. Also, so now that you know the formula for telling time, how would we know what time of day? Because 7 o'clock could be in the morning or evening, or night rather. So that's the next thing that we are going to go to, because I'm going to show you now how to actually differentiate between the different times of day. So we move on to time of day. As you know, generally there are two times of day, morning and night, or day and night rather. But of course there are in-betweens and whatnot. And we're going to look at the different times of day, because if I say it is 5 o'clock, 5 o'clock could be in the morning or 5 o'clock could be in the evening. So we need to know how to make that clear, okay? So there are some expressions here that will help to clarify the time of day, right? So we have, and this will obviously go after the time is mentioned, right? So de la mañana, AM or in the morning. De la tarde, in the afternoon. And de la noche, in the evening or night. Now, when it comes to actually knowing when these particular times are, that might be a little different, but generally morning is going to be from midnight to midday, right? That's usually morning. The afternoon will be from 12 p.m. to like maybe, I'm not sure. I think actually in many Spanish-speaking countries, they consider afternoon to go right up until 6 o'clock. And it's from 6 to midnight that they would consider that night. But it depends on the different parts of the, depends on which party where you are, right? But yeah. But generally I think everybody knows when it's morning, when it's afternoon, when it's night. I think generally, but it could differ depending on where you are in the world, right? Now these are some other expressions. La madrugada. This is dawn or early morning. This would be a little different from mañana. Mañana is like after sunrise, I would say. Mañana is after sunrise. Whereas madrugada would be more like the wee hours, like 2, 3 o'clock, so, like times like those, right? Like those, right? El amanecer, that's sunrise, so that's a noun. That could also be, you could also use that as a verb. El atardecer, that's sunset or dusk. So now let's actually see some examples, right? So 5:40, we know that we already know the formula for telling time. Son las 5:40. Okay? But how do we mark the time? So we want to say AM, which is morning. So we say son las 5:40 de la mañana. Use the phrase here. It is 5:40 in the morning. Here, see? Pretty simple. And 7:11, son las 7:11 de la noche. Because 7:11 is obviously nighttime. So de la noche. So it is 7:11 in the night. Now, let's go back to these expressions a bit. Sometimes you may hear also por la mañana, por la tarde, por la noche. And the obvious question will be, what's the difference? Well, when we are talking about time, and we're talking about exact time, we use de la, right? We're going to use the preposition de followed by the time of day, right? So like here we say son las 5:40 de la mañana, so that's exact. That's an exact time. However, por la mañana or por followed by the time of day will be used to express, will be used generally, right? So it's not going to be used for specific times. For example, I can say hago ejercicio a las 5. No. Perdón. Hago ejercicio por la mañana. I work out in the morning. I have not mentioned any specific time. That's just general. So, hago ejercicio por la mañana means I work out in the morning. I have not mentioned any time, right? But if I want to use a specific time, then I would use de la mañana. So that's the difference between por la mañana or de la mañana, or the difference between de and por. De is going to be for a specific time, whereas por is going to be generally, right? All right, so this is how we indicate the time of day when it comes to time. And now we are going to proceed to some interesting things when it comes to time, because I'm going to show you other ways that you can express times apart from what we would have already gone through. So we continue. And I call this considerations because these are things you should consider when it comes to telling time. So when it comes to the minutes, 15 can also be expressed as cuarto, okay? So, you know, the number for 15 in Spanish is quince, but we could also say cuarto. So, for example, son las 10:15 de la mañana, because you have the time of day marker, right? But I could also say son las 10:15, but cuarto would be more common. But if you say quince, that's fine, right? And the same thing will occur with 30 minutes past. The number for 30 is 30, right? So when it comes to half past or 30 minutes past the hour, 30 can also be expressed as media. So, 2:30 p.m. son las 2:30 de la tarde, or son las 2:30 de la tarde. Same thing, but of course, like cuarto, media would more be used for half past or 30 minutes, right? But it wouldn't be wrong to say 30. More considerations. So 12 o'clock a.m., which is midnight. I could also say I could say son las 12 de la mañana. But to make it simple, I could just say son es medianoche. It is midnight. So midnight is medianoche, right? But saying son las 12 de la mañana wouldn't be technically wrong. But it would be more common to say es medianoche. Same thing with 12 o'clock p.m., which is midday. I could say son las 12 de la tarde. But it is more common to say es mediodía. Now, of course, when we're telling time, we don't always say it is the hour followed by the number of minutes. Sometimes we do what is called a countdown method, right? Where we count the amount of time remaining until the next hour is reached, right? So we can do that in Spanish. So we can also tell time by counting down from next hour, right? So to do that, let me skip to the actual explanation before we get to the example, right? So we mention the next hour followed by menos. So we use the word menos. We introduce the hour that is coming or the following hour, and then we mention the word, we put the word menos, and then we mention the amount of minutes remaining until that hour is reached. So with this method, you'll have to know a little bit of math, right? So for example, 1:50 p.m. In English, we would say 1:50, or we would say 10 to 2, right? 10 to 2. So how do we say that in Spanish? Son las dos, because 2 is the hour that is up, that is next. And we, as I said, we put the word menos. So how many minutes remain until 2 o'clock is reached? 10 minutes. So this is why I say you have to know your math, right? Menos 10 de la tarde, because it's afternoon, right? So son las 2 menos 10 de la tarde. But I could also say es la 1:50 de la tarde. Perfectly fine, no problems, right? But this is just another method that you can use to tell the time. You can count down from the next hour. And this is how we would do it. We mention the next hour, then we put menos, and then we calculate the amount of minutes remaining until that hour is reached. Okay? So this is the end of considerations, and now we're going to proceed to a quiz. So we move on to the first quiz, and I actually forgot to mention that there will be 2 quizzes. The first quiz will require you to write the numerical form, and the second quiz will require you to write the Spanish, right? So yeah, produce the numerical form of the following. Don't worry about the verb ser. We know ser means it is, so you don't have to actually write it is whatever time. Just write the numerical form, right? For this exercise, okay? So number 1, son las 9 de la noche. What is 9? I mean, what is 9? 9, I gave away the answer. So 9, and what time? Night. So that would be 9 p.m. 2, es la 1:15 de la madrugada. Well, you know una is 1, and cuarto, remember what that means? That means 15, right? De la madrugada, so madrugada is the wee hours of the morning, so that would be a.m., right? Just like mañana, so 1:15 a.m. 3, son las 3 menos cuarto de la madrugada. Now this is the countdown method, of course, so let's go. So the upcoming hour is going to be 3, and how much time remains until that hour is reached? Cuarto, which is 15, so 15 minutes, so that would be 2:45 de la madrugada a.m. So 2:45 a.m. Son las 3 menos cuarto de la madrugada. 4, son las 11:30 de la noche. 11 is 11. Media, of course, if you remember, would be 30. De la noche, which is night. So that would be 11:30 p.m. All right. So that brings us to the end of the first quiz. Let's get on to the second. So we move on to the final quiz today, okay? So you know you have to produce the Spanish of the following. So let's go. 1, how would we say 5:42 a.m. in Spanish? All right. So let's use the traditional method. We mentioned the hour. So son las, and of course this means it is, but yeah, son las 5 and how many minutes? Y 42. 42. I could also use the countdown method. So what would be next hour? 6 o'clock, right? So I could say son las 6 menos. So how many minutes until 6 o'clock is reached? 18. So that would be 18 a.m. de la mañana and de la mañana. Okay, so both of these are correct. Son las 5:42 de la mañana or son las 6 menos 18 de la mañana. Cool? Cool. 2. Let's use the traditional method. It is 1 o'clock, so es la 1:38. 38 de la tarde. That's afternoon. De la tarde. Or we could do the countdown method. So what's the next hour? 2 o'clock. Son las 2 menos, and how many minutes remain until 2 o'clock is reached? 22. So menos 22 de la tarde. So es la 1:38 de la tarde or son las 2 menos 22 de la tarde. Cool. 3. Traditional methods son las 12:05 de la tarde. That's afternoon. Yep. There's no other method for that. Okay. And 4. Son. I use back the same number. I use the same number. No, let's change that. That would be too easy. Let's say 7:08. Let's say 7:08. So son las 7:08 de la mañana. All right. So that brings us to the end of this lecture on time. I trust that you got everything, you answered everything correctly. Muchas gracias por ver y hasta luego.